a lot of you may not know this, but Mr. Wangchuk had not been to a formal school till the age of 9. By class 9, by age 9, you're in about class 3, 4, depending on the curriculum and the board you follow. Mr. Wangchuk was born and raised in a remote village near Alchi, for those of you who are familiar with Ladakh. Alchi is known for its monastery. It's big on the tourist map. But he was raised in a 5-house village, which is now a 10-house village, and did not go to a school till the age of 9. My first question to you, Mr. Wangchuk, is what kind of an impediment was that when you actually ended up in school? How did you perceive the school? Were you overwhelmed? Were you completely out of sorts? And how did the people view you? Your classmates, your teachers, that who is this creature? Where has he come from?
I'm sure they're thinking of the same right now also. Who's this creature? Where has it come from? मैं देख रहा हूँ आप में से बहुत लोग थोड़े चकित हैं कि ये ड्रेस देखकर तो मैंने सोचा ये एक संदेश है, एक छोटी मजबूरी भी है, उससे शुरू करूँगा। संदेश ये जब हम आइडियाज़ ऑफ इंडिया की बात करते हैं तो India is very diverse and we should celebrate that diversity, and I thought one way of doing that is to respect and celebrate our dresses from different parts of the country. दूसरी जो कि थोड़ी मजबूरी है और इस मजबूरी का सवाल करना स्कूल न जाने पे ज़्यादा सीखते हैं हम, स्कूल जाने पे ये सब छूट जाता है सवाल करना। तो एक मजबूरी क्या थी कि मैं यहाँ बैठा था और मुझे ठंड लग रही थी और ये बहुत गर्म कपड़े हैं, ऊनी हैं, तो मैं ये पहन के आया। सवाल ये करना चाहता हूँ कि हम बम्बई में लद्दाख क्यों क्रिएट कर रहे हैं हाँ, जहाँ बाहर बहुत अच्छा 29 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड चल रहा है, 30 डिग्री, और हम यहाँ 18 बनाकर बैठे हैं 3 पीस सूट में। तो ये जो आज़ादी का अमृत महोत्सव है, इसमें हमें मन की, दिल की, मानसिकता की आज़ादी शायद अभी बाकी है, क्योंकि हम अभी भी लंदन के अपने जो हमारे सरकार हैं या बॉसेस हैं, उनके छोड़े गए माहौल को बनाए बैठे हैं। और यही वजह है कि जब 47 डिग्री के दिल्ली या मुंबई में हम 18 डिग्री बनाकर इतना प्रदूषण करते हैं तो सस्टेनेबिलिटी का सवाल फिर आता है। तो इसलिए मैं थोड़ा सा चाहता था कि आप इसे भी ध्यान दें कि हम भारत में हैं और यहाँ पर 26 डिग्री सबसे अच्छी तापमान है। 26 पर अगर हम रखें तो बाहर जाएं तो समस्या नहीं, अंदर आए तो समस्या नहीं। कोई बम्बई के लिए ड्रेस्ड आए, जैसे मैं आया था बम्बई के लिए पहनकर, तो उसे तकलीफ़ ना हो। और वैसे आई एम वेरी हैप्पी एंड thankful that you all have done so much to make a Ladakhi feel at home, even in Mumbai. But please take it as an issue and run a campaign. All offices, all hotels, not less than 26 degrees in our India, which is independent once again from the mindset of colonial past. Yeah?
I'd like to intervene here and say here. Too many of us are freezing in air-conditioned environments, being forced to carry woolens to work. For those of us who operate in dubbing studios, Mr. Wangchuk, or go watch a movie, we're always carrying an additional layer of clothing. So please, for those, the lords of air conditioners and climate control, artificial climate control people, 26 degree पे रखिए तापमान कृपया करके। शायद कोई सुन लेगा यहाँ से और हमारी ये पूरी हो जाएगी। So you were telling us how it felt to be in school for the first time at age 9.
Yes, so when little children are sent to schools that discipline you, rather regiment you to think in boxes and squares, you don't ask questions like, why are we making ourselves uncomfortable, spending so much fuel, so much money, and creating 18 degrees, which is our curse in Ladakh. We wish we had 29 degrees, and you have it, but you create Ladakh in Mumbai. So that questioning is what becomes a victim when you are schooled in the schools of the kind of schools that our children go. So luckily, very luckily, in retrospect, very luckily, I didn't have a school to go till 9 years of age, and that doesn't mean that we don't learn. You know, all these things of the phenomenon of nature, which is all in the books, whether it is science or maths, the best school is curiosity, you know, and not your big names in schools and the rich schools or so. As long as you have curiosity, you can learn with or without schools, and that was what I was lucky to have. Thanks, I was nothing special. Every child is gifted with this great software of learning. If you want today's lingo, then the best learning software in the world is curiosity. And that is exactly what we kill in most of our schools. So for me, that was a great liberation not to have to go to a place that kills my curiosity, and the rest happens on its own. When you have curiosity, nothing can stop you from learning. If you don't have that, then the best of schools and best of teachers can't do much. So when I was finally brought to a school, actually it was the end of my happy learning. I had to struggle after that to learn, you know. So you could be learning from swimming in the Indus, climbing up the mountains and the apricot trees, and being on the farm, throwing seeds in the ground to see the roots go down and leaves unfurl without having to memorize L-E-A-F, leaf, and L-E-A-V-E-S, leaves, in an alien language that we don't even speak.
I think you're being also very modest by not sharing that in the very first year that Mr. Wangchuk finally entered formal schooling, he went from class 1 to class 3 in 4 months, because he had learned so much conventionally from the conventional wisdom that comes as part of our indigenous culture. And you know, when we were talking about planting seeds and seeing the leaves come out, that is usually the age, you know, in class 1 and 2 that children are taught to experiment with germination. You put seeds and you put some pani and the green dal sprouts, and you learn that. He learned that firsthand at their farm and at his village. You know, I want to just go away for 1 second.
Well, I will add to that. The second great opportunity I had by not being in school was this great luxury which very few children get, to learn in mother tongue. So my mother taught me in my mother tongue, and that is a great foundation. आपकी मातृभाषा अगर मजबूत हो तो भाषाएं आपको 6 महीने लगते हैं. मुझे अंग्रेजी सीखने में कोई समय नहीं लगा, हिंदी सीखने में नहीं, फ्रेंच में नहीं. 6 महीने में भाषाएं सीख सका, क्योंकि मेरी मातृभाषा मेरी माँ ने बहुत मजबूत किया. तो मैं आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव पे कहना चाहता हूँ कि ये आज़ादी कब मिलेगी हमें, हमारे बच्चों को.
ये एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण बात मिस्टर वांगचुक ने की है. हमें एक तरीके से सिखाया जाता है कि हमें हमारी जो मदर टंग है, जो हमारी मातृभाषा है, उसमें सीखने की बजाय अंग्रेज़ी में सीखना चाहिए. क्यों आप पंजाब से होकर अंग्रेज़ी में साइंस और मैथ सीख रहे हैं? क्यों आप महाराष्ट्र से होकर, जब आपको मराठी में आपकी सारी बेसिक एजुकेशन होनी चाहिए, क्यों आपको सिखाया जा रहा है? और क्या हो रहा है कि उस लैंग्वेज बैरियर की वजह से बच्चे लैग करते हैं क्लासेस में. एंड आई थिंक मदर टंग जिंदगी में लैग करते हैं, और मदर टंग में जो शिक्षा दी जाती है, अगर उस पर हम जोर दें, बाकी लैंग्वेजेस तो कभी भी एक्वायर की जा सकती हैं. पर क्यों हम एक हाइब्रिड मॉडल क्रिएट करने की कोशिश करते हैं कि अपनी लैंग्वेज को भी सीख लें, फिर बीच बीच में इंग्लिश में भी कर लें, फिर उन दोनों को हम मैरी करने के चक्कर में कहीं पिछड़ जाते हैं. सो आई थिंक इट्स अ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट यू मेड देयर, कि जो हमारी खुद की ज़ुबान है वो हमें नेचुरली आती है, उसमें सीखना बहुत आसान है हमारे लिए, चाहे वो भूगोल हो, चाहे वो इतिहास हो, चाहे वो साइंस हो, जो भी हो. और जब हम उसे अप्लाई करते हैं एक दूसरी लैंग्वेज में, वो लर्निंग प्रोसेस शायद स्लो हो जाता है. यू नो, Mr. Wangchuk and I have a small thing in common. इन्होंने अपनी काफ़ी फॉर्मल एजुकेशन जब इन्होंने शुरू की थी 9 साल की उम्र से, केंद्र विद्यालयों में की है. मेरी भी काफ़ी एजुकेशन केंद्र विद्यालय में हुई है. All KV students, anybody here, can you put your hands up? Okay, so very few, but केंद्र विद्यालय students. And मैंने 2 साल बिताए केंद्र विद्यालय ले में, लद्दाख में. और उस वक्त जब मैं वहाँ पढ़ रही थी, मेरे फादर आर्मी में थे, मुझे लद्दाख में बहुत घूमने का मौका मिला. और एक जो हमारी क्वार्टरली एक्सकर्जन हुआ करती थी, वो नुब्रा जाने की हुआ करती थी, खारदुंगला पास को क्रॉस करके नुब्रा जाने की. एंड वी वर टॉकिंग येस्टरडे, और इन्होंने मुझे एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बात बताई जिसका ध्यान जो मेरे दिमाग में भी नहीं आ रही थी. और वो ये कि जब आप खारदुंगला क्रॉस करते हैं नुब्रा में डिसेंड करने के लिए, there used to be a metal bridge connecting two ends of a glacier 20 years ago. I mean, I began to go to Ladakh as a tourist sometime 20 years ago, every year after having, of course, lived there as a child. And वो जो bridge आज भी है, लेकिन it no longer connects two parts of a glacier. It's not even water anymore. There is nothing. It's just rubble and leftover eroded track of the glacier. And that's just in 20 years. Khardungla Pass, something we're all familiar with. It's the highest motorable pass in the world, etc., etc., etc. But climate change is real and it's happening as we speak. And we were talking about this yesterday. And in fact, it was evidenced for the first time by the rest of the public in 2010 when Ladakh saw its first flash floods. Or what we thought were the first flash floods. And of course, Mr. Wangchuk will tell us, it neither was the first flash flood, nor was it the last, and how it has now started a cycle of floods, cloudbursts and floods, followed by droughts. So tell us about how this cycle has suddenly come out of nowhere, and how this, when you were talking to elders in your village, there was no memory of a cloudburst like this.
So while we sit in an 18-degree hall in 30 or 40-degree Mumbai, or 2 days ago I was in Mongolia, it was minus 18 outside. It's not just us here. And I was sweating in the hotel at 27 degrees. Yeah? I don't know why we overdo, why Mongolia can't be happy with plus 18 of Mumbai, and Mumbai can't be happy with plus 27 of Mongolia. If they're happy there, why can't we be? I mean, I start doubting if human beings are rational animals. Maybe only the rational part needs to be taken off. The rest is fine. So, while we are doing this kind of ayashi, up there in places like Ladakh, glaciers are going away, and they are not going quietly. They are releasing, unleashing flash floods that wash away households, villages, farmlands. And yes, 2010 is what you may have heard, because roughly 1,000 lives were lost in that, and half of Leh was washed away. But I saw the first one in 2006, when I went and volunteered in this village called Phyang, where we have our alternative university now. Just as a volunteer, many families had lost their houses, farmlands, and even people. I asked, while helping them, an elder person, when was the last flash flood like this you have seen? And he started thinking and said, I have never seen one. I've only heard of such things from my ancestors or elders. And you know what? The next one was 2010. 4 years later, much bigger. And the next one was 2012. The next one was 2015. Another 2017. So the frequency has increased so much. And each of these leaves drought to follow, because as all the water goes away, and when it's flushed away, it takes with it the fines in the mountains, in soil, which absorbs, which are like sponges, and any vegetation, and therefore even less capacity to absorb And therefore, even smaller rains, it doesn't take a rain as big as the first one to cause the next flash flood. So that's happening there, while this is happening here. There's some connection. So that's why I'm appealing to you all to please live simply in the big cities so that we in the mountains may simply live.
I think that hits hard, that we should live simply in the cities so that the folks in the mountains who are actually at the forefront of climate change can just live. I think that really hurts you to the bone to realize that what we do could be impacting the lives of people who have nothing to do with these choices. Mr. Wangchuk, you mentioned how the education system is conditioned to taking away conditions children by taking away their curiosity. And how when you first entered formal education, you found it was the end of your happy learning and your happy curiosity. And then you went ahead, you changed many Kendra Vidyalayas in various parts of Jammu and Kashmir, and then eventually pursued your engineering, and then you decided to come back and change what you thought was wrong with the education system. What did you do? What did you come back and do? And what motivated you to do that? I mean, it's so easy to pursue brighter careers and, like all of your colleagues from engineering college, go to the US and pursue big dreams. What did you do differently, and what was your inflection point which made you make a different choice in life?
Again, my childhood without schools is to blame. Yeah? Schools teach you so many subjects, but my childhood with my mother and the villagers on the farmland taught me not just questioning these phenomena of nature, but also empathy. From my mother, I learned this valuable asset that schools don't teach. Schools teach you to compete and, tread over others. But my village, my ancestors, my grandmother, through her stories, taught me to think about others and not just about self. Yeah? So this is to blame. Because of this, when I was doing my engineering, a happy accident, I would say, happened, and which was that I had to fend for myself. I had to support my own engineering. And to do that, I decided not to take from my home. They were well off, but I decided not to and do it myself. And to do that, I had to do something. The only thing I could do was to teach. And therefore, I started teaching students in Ladakh in the vacations from my engineering college. And during that, I came face to face with the disastrous education system. Perfectly bright Ladakhi children were failing at the rate of 95% every year in their 10th grade exams, which are like the passport to future. And nobody was questioning. They were all blaming the children. You're bad children. And I could see firsthand, they were so bright, so enthusiastic, so humble. What more could you ask from children? So there was something, I said, in the system. Because when 95% of the products fail in a car factory or a software firm, then it is the system that should be looked into. So that made me think that in life, it's not just about what I need, but also about what needs me. Yeah? And these children needed me more than what I needed. My friends were going to the Silicon Valley and Bangalore after their engineering. I decided to go back to Ladakh and see if I can help them and see if I can change this dismal system. So that empathy, which is missing perhaps in our schools, to do it for humanity is what I would say made me decide to go back and, yeah.
And I think it's this empathy that you want everybody to have to be able to then eventually make sustainable choices. You're not making sustainable choices just for yourself. You're ultimately making sustainable choices so that you can help those who don't directly partake in those choices. Like again and again, choices made in big cities are impacting the lives of people in the mountains.
Exactly. Not only personal choices, but people when they choose their professions or even businesses, it should be out of empathy. And this will help their businesses also. Businesses or ideas or startups that are rooted on empathetic understanding of people and actually solves a problem are going to be the best businesses even in their financial bottom line, So this is missing. And that's why the foundation of, whether it is social or business entrepreneurship, or any choices, if it is empathy, finally it makes everybody else happy, and that happiness then, you can't escape.
So I'd in fact go as far as saying that empathy is the foundation of sustainability. Without empathy, there can be no sustainability.
Exactly. It is unempathetic, insensitive, profit alone oriented growth that has landed us in this soup. So to come out of it, we have to choose different inputs, ingredients in our children. And that's where education comes. I mean, Kailash ji was talking about freedom for the rural children who are in very bad shape. But the urban children are in no better shape. Actually, it might be physical challenges that the rural children are facing, but the urban children are also facing a very poor education system that lands them in this kind of situation. I mean, I would consider a tribal child, sentinels they're called, in Andaman, perhaps much more lucky if we in the big cities manage to create viruses that can wipe out the whole civilization or nuke each other, as is starting to happen. You would wonder which was better for the human beings and the planet, the tribal in Andamans or in Ladakh, or the so-called very modern, very highly schooled, I won't even say educated, child in a big city. So,
Your intervention in the schooling system led to a pass percentage of 75% from when failure was at 90%. And before I ask you the next question, Mr. Wangchuk, the failure at 90%, and this is a personal question, I mean, it comes from my own curiosity, was that 90% failure on account of not being taught in the native language? Because I noticed there was a huge barrier in Kendra Vidyalaya with my Ladakhi classmates who were being forced to study in Hindi or in English when they probably understood those concepts in Ladakhi very well.
Yes. Thank you for asking that. As I said, the children were very bright and enthusiastic. That's what you need, as ingredients. But they would fail. And I also wondered why they were failing. And then very soon I realized that nothing was their, playing field. They were made to play on a field that they didn't even understand. To begin with, in a language like Urdu, they would be taught at the age of 6 when they would have spoken only Ladakhi at home. And then suddenly in 8th grade, everything would turn into English. So such a nightmare of languages that only, if you could design for failure, you couldn't come up with a better design. And then what you studied in those alien languages was even more surprising. So in this -20, -30 Ladakhi classroom, where children are shivering, they would be memorizing A for apple, B for ball, that's fine, but F for fan, shivering and F for fan. And a child would ask, but what is this, sir? And the teacher would scratch his head and say, I don't know, I have never seen one, but I'm told it keeps you cold and cool. And the children, why would anybody need to be colder than we are feeling? So this is symbol of what the system was, thoughtless, insensitive, blanket application of things that are irrelevant to the lives. And we spend 15 to 16 years of our precious human life in those schools. So aren't you happy I didn't have one to go?
I'm actually jealous that I did not also have the same joy of not going to school till class, till class 3 and age 9. So coming back to when you came back after you finished your engineering degree, you set up these interesting learning centers. And I was reading, and of course, when we exchanged notes yesterday, I was blown away by your ice stupa. An ice stupa as tall as 100 feet. 100 feet is effectively 9 stories. I mean, eight to 9 stories, depending on how low your ceiling is. And how you managed to make those ice stupas, and they started from a requirement of trying to find water during. Oh yeah, that's one of the smaller ones.
Yeah, smaller.
And it started from trying to solve a local problem of growing in the month of May, when spring finally arrives in Ladakh, and there not being enough water. From there being so much water earlier by way of ice and snow, to there being zero, well, not zero, but very, very little water for cultivation by the time you reach May. And how you and your team set about trying to fix that. Do you want to tell us about that? I mean, where did the idea come from? How did you build these? Yes. And how did they survive till May? May is very, very warm in Ladakh. The sun is very bright and everything else melts. And here's the interesting thing about Ladakh. It can snow there, and in 3 days, the snow just goes away because the sun is strong. And yet, you've had these stupas last up till June.
Yeah, we can change some other pictures.
Do we have more images of these?
There are various ways. Okay. So it's...
I think they'll come.
More about applying what is in the textbooks to solve local challenges. Yeah? The spirit is about that, rather than, it can be water, it can be cold winters, it can be farming in a desert. But the school that we started finally, after helping children pass better in the government schools, by the way, yes, 95% became 75% success. At that point, we said, let's take care of the failures who still fail in the system. And together with them, at this school that we created, we started applying what is in the textbooks to solve problems. And that's the best practical that you can have in schools. So one of our problems as glaciers are melting away is that in springtime, there's shortage of water. That's the bottleneck, you know. After that, in July, you have floods even. You have too much water when all the glaciers melt. But in spring, there's shortage of water. Yet in winter, there's some stream still flowing in winter. But that's when people don't need water, so what's the use? So the idea was to freeze the water when it is not used in January, February, and keep it frozen till May, June. Now that's easier said than done, because all the ice is gone by March end. So this is application of middle school geometry. In geometry, if you remember, there are shapes that have low surface area for the given volume. Shapes like, if you remember, spheres, hemispheres, cones. So we said, if we make our ice not flat, but in conical forms, then it will have low surface area for the sun to melt. Sun demands surface area. We don't give it. But farmers don't care about surface area. They want volume. So this has high volume, low surface area. Let's freeze it in this shape and then see how long it lasts. Now the next problem was, how do you make it 10 stories, 12 stories tall and without pumps? We didn't have resources nor the power in the mountains. But you learn to appreciate what you have and not mourn what you don't. We don't have money, we don't have pumps or power, but we have gravity, because mountains are all slopes and slope means gravity. So use that as a resource. All it takes is put a pipe upstream, bring it down, and as you might remember, water always maintains its level. That's how masons do the leveling. So the water at inlet upslope and the water at outlet downstream will want to go to the same level. So there will be pressure in the pipe without power, without pollution. So to that, if you put a fountain, then it sprays water into the minus 20 air, which takes away its heat. And that heat, which makes water into solid state or ice, if you remember your high school science, is called latent heat. So as it loses its latent heat mid-air, it comes down and falls naturally in the shape of a cone. Now there, it didn't stop there. This is a prototype of an innovation that only an engineer could love. You know? In America, they say, he has a face only a mother could love. Means very ugly. Huh? So this is a shape only an engineer could love. So we wanted to make it connect to the local people. So we said innovation should not stop in labs. It should link to society. And we saw conical white structures dotting the landscape of Ladakh, and you would remember, and they are called stupas or chortens. So we said, why not call it an ice stupa? So make a connect between the lab and the homes. And immediately it clicked. One of the most respected spiritual leaders of Ladakh, who is also the UN ambassador for mountain partnerships, His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche, immediately took the idea and spread it, and it became a thing that people felt was from their traditions. So this was this blending of technology and tradition that I'm more proud of than just the conical structure that saves 10 million liters of water.
I think we don't have the image we would like to show you here, which is essentially a really, really tall ice stupa with prayer flags all over, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I wish we could have showed you that, but
it is there. So the prayer flags, we then to position it. Now here you put some marketing and branding into traditional societies. So we wanted to position it like stupas, and stupas often have prayer flags on them. So we put prayer flags. I wish they could show the picture of that. There are several pictures I gave you. So prayer flags, and we said to the villagers, so if we put the prayer flags, the ice will last longer in the summer. And we were not completely lying, because it's not a divine force that would do it, but partial shading and partial windbreak in the warm spring time would actually have an effect, but we were doing it on the first one to position it like one of the stupas. So that way it became an ice stupa, and I was most touched when I saw very elderly ladies prostrating in front of the ice stupas as a savior of not as much the divine, but of the climate change challenge.
And of course, giving precious water for the crop. Another innovation that I want to talk about quickly is how you are heating. So those of you who've traveled to Ladakh in winter, temperatures drop to minus 20, minus 30 even. And heating inside is a function of these very traditional, inefficient, archaic things called bukharis, which are also very, very dangerous. I mean, there are lots of fire incidents as a result of the kerosene bukhari or the wooden bukhari. And how you used, again, not engineering level science, but high school level science to heat. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling.
Yes, so another application of what is in the textbooks that bothers you in the exams, but they could do more than just bother you in the exams, was the chapter on heat in 9th grade. You know, it has conduction, convection, radiation, if you remember. Applying those and the plenty of sunshine that Ladakh has, we said, why only mourn about Ladakh not having trees on the mountains, oil in the ground? That's what most people used to do. Where are we? We don't even have oil in the ground to heat, nor trees on the mountains. But we said, how about the sun? We have more than anybody else on the planet, perhaps. 300 sunshine days. So why not make the most of it? And sure enough, using houses that would orient, first of all, towards the sun, the winter sun, which takes a little bit of geography from their textbooks, which talks about where the sun is in the winter on the northern hemisphere, which is the southern sky. So if you have really a grasp of your geography, it's a no-brainer to orient your house to the south, so that in winter it captures all the sun. And capture it does in glass facade, but it would overheat. So you have to put something that will store the water till night. So you put a black wall, and black, you read in your books, is an absorber of energy. So it absorbs best. And then you put water in the walls, which has very high specific heat. Yeah? Those of you who remember your science. So water is an amazing battery. When it comes to heat, you don't need these lead acid, lithium ion, and all such mumbo jumbo. You need just water, which is the best battery you can have, and naturally so, and doesn't cause any pollution or anything. So you use water battery walls on the south that are put in black painted containers, and the sun hits that wall, absorbed by the water. It's kept till night, which is when you have cold. So day is fine. So at night, these walls radiate. The next, in heat, radiation comes. Similarly, in the day, convection of air happens, so that it takes the warmth of the black walls and delivers it to the room with air moving in currents, which is convection. So just simply using them, and of course some very meticulous designing and planning, gives you a house that stays at plus 18 to plus 25, 90% of the times in minus 20 Ladakh. Yeah? That's possible.
It's time for my last question, but I do have a supplementary question to the last question. My last question is, what can the rest of India, I mean, we've talked about how empathy is critical to even contemplating sustainability. You have to first be empathetic and actively cultivate empathy, because it's no longer our default setting. And you have to actively cultivate empathy in order to start moving on the path to sustainability. And Ladakh has showed us the way in terms of how we can, in small bits, work around climate change and find ways through innovations like the ones you talked about to do that. So is there something India can learn from Ladakh, not just because of the resilience of the people for how they live and the extreme temperatures they have to face, but in terms of what they're doing for sustainability and how India can look forward in the next 25 years as we march towards 100 years of independence? What can we learn from Ladakh? And my supplementary question is, I'm sure everybody in this room knows that Amir Khan's character in Three Idiots, when he goes back to Ladakh, is actually based on Mr. Sonam Wangchuk. So how many people have seen Three Idiots here? So when Amir Khan cannot be reached and he's suddenly dropped off the radar, he's in Ladakh building these incredible inventions. That is the character inspired by the actual work that Mr. Wangchuk has done. So, on to my real question now. How did that make you feel? But more importantly, what can Ladakh teach the rest of India as we look forward?
First of all, your last question, it made me feel very sad that people have to associate a person to a film character to understand them. And I'm sure there are so many wonderful people in your neighborhood. You will wait for some film to come out to celebrate them, to support them, and to understand them. So please don't do that. Please don't do that. Secondly, what India or the world can learn from Ladakh? What really saddens me when I come to big cities in India or elsewhere, but more so in India actually, is the gap between rich and poor. You know, we have perhaps the richest people in the world, and yet in the neighborhood we have people who are perhaps worse off than in any part of the world. I can't understand how we can hold our heads high when our younger sisters and brothers are in the gutters. How can we sleep at night? So, nation is an extension of a family. How can a brother or a sister be proud of his wealth or her wealth when her very younger sister is being sold? We cannot. And therefore, perhaps we can learn that it doesn't take all this wealth to make us happy. In Ladakh, we don't have very rich, we don't have very poor, we have no beggars, we have no billionaires. And that's very important for a nation to be a happy nation. And mind you, when I say things like we should have an equitable society, etc., people think, okay, this is social mumbo jumbo. It doesn't work. But I want to tell you in your own terms, to the industrialists and to the big businessmen, in your own economics, there's a theory called the law of diminishing returns in economics, yeah? Which says that when you buy your first pair of shoes, you get 100% satisfaction. Okay, amazing. Because without those pair of shoes, you would be really suffering. But when you get your second pair of shoes, the satisfaction is diminishing. By the 10th and the 20th and the 40th pair of shoes, you hardly get any satisfaction, but you're just spending away buying and hoarding those and actually making a whole industry go around and belching smoke. And every time you take that pair of shoes from the showroom, another truck comes, delivers, another factory goes and causes what the planet has become. Now, that's law of diminishing returns. So therefore, you don't even get the value for your money. Now, what I want to add to that, and that could be a learning from Ladakh, is that how about being rich, buying that 30th and 40th pair of shoes still, but not for yourself. For the rest of our brothers and sisters who are running around without pairs of shoes, then you get that 440,000% satisfaction. And that's when India will become a truly liberated, equal nation. Secondly, what Ladakh can teach and what Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, and I hold it close to my heart, is that for a human being, the greatest achievement is not fulfilling 1,000 desires, which is what we are chasing, taking after our masters in London and New York. We are chasing to fulfill our 1,000th desire, only to realize that it's only the beginning. There are more and more and more. So Buddha said, for a man, it is a greater achievement to conquer a single desire than to fulfill 1,000 desires. So therefore, this philosophy will make India Vishwaguru, not chasing them and fulfilling our 1,001st desire. So this, I would say. And finally, as I started, please live simply in the big cities so we can simply live in the mountains. We started a movement, a campaign, to appeal to young people in the cities who are not happy with preachings and lectures and so on. We made a crowdfunding site called ilivesimply.org. This is a crowdfunding site where you don't have to part with your money, but it can give the planet more than what money can do. Money can't solve much, but if you make a pledge and contribute a pledge to change your lifestyle, for example, to turn your AC thermostat up to 26 degrees, or to walk instead of your car where possible, or to bicycle, or to take trains instead of aeroplanes, or to plant trees, then it converts it into equivalent dollars. And you can see how much you're contributing. So I want to be a billionaire in that kind of dollars. And help me do that. And
Thank you so much for those wonderful thoughts, and thank you all for being such an outstanding audience. Can we have a big round of applause, please,
Thank you.
for Mr. Sonam Wangchuk? Thank you very much. Thank you.